We're here to talk about the new technologies, how they're going to affect our sector, and specifically some stuff that we've been doing around the skills for technicians. But first of all, I've got a couple of good speakers that are joining me here today. And the first person I'd like to call to the stage is Quentin Lahete from JIPA. JIPA, if you don't know them, are experts in data on the aftermarket. And he's going to talk to us about the trends that are going on in the market. And then after that, we'll have Tom Denton, who's one of our technical experts, who's going to be talking about the effects of the new technology. Then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion between the three of us. So I'd like to invite Quentin to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Steve. So the idea here is to start with some milestones about the topic that we're going to discuss, which is electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles. So first of all, an overlook of the new registration last year in 2018. If you have a look at it, what I'm going to call the EU5 is the UK, France, Spain, Italy, and Germany. Okay. In the EU5, you can see that there is a growth compared to the previous years in terms of the share of new registration, which are actually either electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, and you can see the share between the two technology. Okay. In the UK, there was 6% of new registration last year. As a reminder, there were in total 2.3. A bit more than 2.3 million passenger car new registration last year. So we're looking at more than 120,000 new registration with those new technology. Right? If you have a look at the other countries, we are on a similar trends. Okay, with one particular point and country which is very different that we highlighted here, Norway. Okay, Norway, you can see 58% of new registration were either hybrid or electric vehicles. I think it's important to have in mind that Norway doesn't have at all the same infrastructure that we have in terms of electric grid and government levy and support to purchase that kind of cars. So this is very important to have this in mind. Okay, but if we look at the UK, we're looking like this. So that's what happened in 2018. Okay, we saw after the first quarter of 2019, that more or less electric registration are stable compared to last year. However, hybrid is on the increase, plus 24% compared to Q1 year-on-year in 2018. So the trend is definitely on the growing side. Okay, so we had a look at this and try to thought about the future. Okay, if we have a look at the EU5 new registration, you can see that by 2025 this will increase a little bit compared to 2019, but not that far. The market in EU5 is mature. We're not talking about the Chinese markets where there is 30 million new registration every year. Okay, we're talking about a fairly mature market. Now, if we have a look at our hypothesis on the right side. On the right side, you can see our prevision in terms of what is the share of new registration, which is either going to be electric or hybrid vehicle. There was roughly about 6% last year in EU5. We estimated with an aggressive scenario 10% this year and up to 65% by 2025. So we would overcome the 50% around 2014. We could do many different scenarios. We don't have a crystal ball. It's never going to be perfect, okay? However, we would classify this as a quite aggressive one, okay? And we could do many other scenarios with our tool. We could do a pessimistic one, a very optimistic one. We believe that one is quite optimistic. And this is based on this scenario that we will have from 2019, 1 million vehicles which are either hybrid or electric, right? And by 2025, 7 million of them registered in 2025, okay? So that brings us to that's new registration. Based on this scenario, that brings us to a car park of, a total car park of 170 million in those 5 different countries, and in volume, almost 27 million of hybrids and electric vehicles. So those vehicles are gonna need to be maintained, and that's what is important. We're looking at almost 16% of the car park based on the previous scenario that we saw. Okay, a car park takes a long time to be changed, if we can say that, to be renewed, and it will take time to see those cars taking over the normal ICE engine. Okay. However, it would be already by 2025, given our hypothesis about 16% of the car park in EU5 region. If you have a look at the age of those vehicles, at the moment, the hybrid electric vehicles is about 3.3 years old vehicles, mainly a few brands, okay? However, a lot of brands are improving their range and offering more models, and those models have a better range as well. And the ICE vehicle age is 9.5 years old, okay? So we have a very interesting different dynamic between those two car park, which are really going to be two totally different car park in terms of technology, in terms of how it is going to be handled. So yeah, watching my watch, just making sure I'm on time. Looking now by 2025, what does it mean? It means that actually the hybrid car park is going to be younger than it is now, because the volume is only going to start in the coming years. And only in the coming years, the big volume, 7 million, not billion, 7 million in 2025, the volume is just going to start at this stage, okay? So the car park, hybrid and electric car park, is actually going to get younger, which means that the vehicle manufacturer is going to have a lot of opportunity. However, there is a share of the car park which is already going to be interested into the aftermarket, the independent one, independent side of the aftermarket. And this is where it is very important to get ready ASAP, because 2025 is tomorrow almost, so we need to get ready. On the other hand, you can see that the ICE car park is going to increase even more, 11.2 years old on average. So here, in terms of aftermarket opportunities, this is great. This is a bit more of, it is especially good news for the independent aftermarket, where they attract the older vehicle. So long story short, those vehicles are coming, the volume are coming, and this is now that we need to think about the transition from one model, one business model to another one. Thank you, Steve. I'll hand back to you. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to invite Tom Denton to the stage, who's going to talk to you a bit about the technology itself and the effects that that's going to have on the skills we need in the business.
Thank you, Steve. I'm just going to show you 3 slides very quickly, just to illustrate some of the issues with the technologies that are coming along on the new vehicles. Now, it's easy to think about safety issues when we talk about high voltages, but we need to touch on other areas as well of the technology that people are going to have to learn about and be qualified, trained, and safe. So just as an example here, I've got a picture of an Audi Q7 battery, and you know, the battery itself is complicated enough, but in this case, you can see, because it's a cutaway, the additional things that are included there to do with cooling, temperature control of the battery, heating it and cooling it, of course, charging it, charge balancing, so each individual cell in the battery has to be balance charged in an appropriate way to keep the whole thing operating correctly. So it's just an example of some of the technology that's coming along. And you know, people would often say, oh, well, you know, when this goes wrong, it'll have to be thrown away after sort of 10 years, it's worth nothing. Not true. With the right sort of skills, people can take this battery out of the car, find the faulty cell, fix it, and put it back in the car. Now, that's still going to be a few £1,000 job, but that's comparable with fitting a new internal combustion engine, for example. So these things are coming, but new skills are needed for them. We'll pick up on some more of these points when we go back to the interview. This next slide is just to represent the issues associated with connected vehicles. Just a picture representing the cars talking to each other. That's one thing. With a connected vehicle, it can talk to the car in front of the car in front to know whether it's safe to overtake or not, for example. Those are some of the things that are coming along. But associated with this sort of thing, of course, is cybersecurity. Has the latest update been done? Have you done an update to the car that's going to cause it to go wrong? You know, we laugh about the blue screen of death on our laptops or something. This is a bigger issue when traveling at 70 miles an hour, isn't it? You know, if something goes amiss. So this is an area that's also very important for the future. So traffic information, cybersecurity, the training that goes with it, again, very important. Now this, to pick on a different subject again, is looking more towards what I like to call automated driving rather than autonomous, but there we go, we can debate that later. This is just a representation of some of the sensors that are going to be on the higher level automated driving vehicles. So potentially at the front of the car, radar, sort of radio, direction and ranging, LiDAR doing a similar thing with light, a camera, which are the ones joined by the blue lines, cameras front and rear and on all the different sides, ultrasonic sensors, a driver monitoring camera to make sure the driver's not going to sleep when they should be taking over and looking after things that are going along, information coming into the ECU and much more. There are even developments where cars now have a microphone essentially as a sensor that will listen for an emergency vehicle. So it knows if an ambulance is coming behind and will pull over accordingly. Again, all of these systems will need repairing and calibrating, and hence there's a need for particular skills to do this. You know, if you're a customer using these sort of cars, who would you trust to repair this level of technology? Would it be the garage round the corner that's not trained, or would it be somewhere that's fully trained and safe while they're working on it? The consequences of incorrect work and incorrect adjustment on some of these vehicles is dire, not only for the technicians, but for the people who use them. So that's it from me, just a very quick introduction. I'm going to hand back over to Steve now, who I think who forgot to introduce himself, by the way. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the IMI, so I'll do that for him now. We've got a short video to show you now, I think, Steve, and then over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Just leading into that, yes, of course, I am Steve Nash, the Chief Executive of the Institute of the Motor Industry, which is the industry's professional body. I think it's worth saying that because there are 48 trade bodies in the automotive industry, of which the SMMT is one of, you know, a major one, of course. There's only one professional body, though. And our job is to look after the people in the industry, across the industry. 150 different jobs in retail alone. And just to make it clear, we're not about franchised or independent, we're about professional versus unprofessional. And that is a key point, because whether it's the garage around you mentioned the garage around the corner may be very, very well qualified, may be properly invested in skills, may not. The point of the matter is, what is the baseline level of skill you need for all this new technology? So there are obviously health and safety risks around working on electrified vehicles. And there is a legal basis behind that. There is regulation. The Electricity at Work Act applies. And the Health and Safety Executive's job is to enforce that. Actually, if you're working on anything over 50 volts, the Electricity at Work Act applies. Clearly, these things can be 600 to 800 volts, more than enough to spoil your day. So I will talk about that, but in the broader context, we have to look forward as well. ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, is a reality. Pretty much every new car's got some level of that on it now, and it's not straightforward. You know, simple things like changing windscreens is not simple anymore. Calibrating these things, you require an awful lot of equipment, and they're not all calibrated the same way. And then you look at the connected vehicle that Tom's talked about. It's one of my favourite statistics, but I don't mind repeating it, that it takes 2.8 terabytes of data for an A380 Airbus, the most sophisticated airliner in the world, to fly itself across the Atlantic from 30 feet above the ground in America to 30 feet above the ground here. It takes 48 terabytes of data, roughly, for a car to drive itself up a high street. Now, you wouldn't get on that A380 Airbus if the person working on it didn't have certifiable skills. Similarly, with the whole connected piece, you wouldn't give your laptop with all the passwords and everything to somebody that you didn't, whose fidelity you couldn't guarantee. So why would you give your car that will have all of that data and more in it to somebody whose skills and fidelity you couldn't guarantee? Hence, we've developed something called TechSafe, which covers all of that. And actually, I'll let the film tell you about that.
The reason why the IMI is developing professional standards for electrified vehicles is because, first of all, there's a duty of care on employers to make sure that their employees are working within the law. The Electricity at Work Act applies here. Health and Safety Executive are there to enforce it. But also, we need to know as an industry, we need to agree what the basic minimum standards are. So what does good look like if you're an employer? How do you know that you're safe, that you're making your employees safe, that the levels of knowledge they have, the equipment they have, all of those other requirements are being met to a standard that can be signed off so that you can, you've done the right thing.
This is more critical because of the safety factor and the injuries that can be caused when people are working on these electric vehicles.
There is a sizable skills gap which exists within our industry, particularly in the area of electrics. And now is our chance to fill that gap and ensure that our technicians are safe.
The employers need to be aware of what their liabilities are. The safety, the health and safety of their employees is absolutely paramount, but you don't know what you don't know. So working with the health and safety side of things, with the Electricity Work Act, knowing what your responsibilities are absolutely important.
Well, we always tick every box that we're meant to tick, and health and safety being one of them. And it worries me greatly that a liability could end up on my shoulders, so it's really important that I'm up to date with what's going on, and I make sure that goes down the line with people who are aware of what their requirements are before working on a vehicle. I certainly don't want health and safety executive after me, so I'd make sure that we were safe as a business.
I think we had a great meeting today where we had a very broad spread of opinions, but generally a lot of agreement around the fact that minimum standards need to exist. It's up to individuals whether they go above those standards, but we need to know where the baseline is and have a common currency.
So as you saw, TechSafe is one of our major ongoing campaigns. What is it? Well, look, let's take the EV piece first, or the electrified vehicles, because you can't just talk about pure EVs. We've been working with a panel of industry experts. This has to be supported. This is not about the IMI flying a kite and saying what good looks like. We need the industry to support that. We've been working with government for a long time around this. The government's Road to Zero strategy actually has a commitment in it to work with the IMI on the skills needed in the industry to make sure that people can work safely with the new technologies. And we've actually developed some standards which we've been working with a very, very broadly based industry group on, which we've been presenting back to government. Because the Health and Safety Executive who enforced the Electricity at Work Act, frankly, don't know what it is they're enforcing. They don't know what good looks like. So from an employer's point of view, an employer needs to know on an absolutely minimum level what they need to do, and so do the HSE actually. They need to know what the minimum that needs to be done is, so that if somebody does have an accident, let's face it, a highly skilled person can do something stupid, but the employer needs to be able to say, look, that guy was properly trained, he was properly accredited to these industry recognized standards, in those cases, you know, the HSE would take that into account. Similarly, I mean, we've been talking with the insurance industry, and they have said quite clearly that if somebody's in transgression of the health and safety at work regulations, or rather the electricity at work regulations, their liability insurance wouldn't apply. So, I mean, this is a pretty damn serious issue for somebody who decides to take on work on this kind of technology without actually investing in the proper skills. So what is it we're actually, as a group, you know, that is the IMI working with this broad industry group, is recommending? It's 3 levels, really, because the type of work you get out of these cars is not one type of work. It's a level 2, level 3, and level 4 accreditation. At level 2, in very simple terms, and we can talk a little bit about this because Tom's very heavily involved in this too. At level 2, this is about making the car safe to work around the high voltage electrics. At level 3, it's about being able to do all of that and do diagnostics on the electrics. And some straightforward replacement stuff. At level 4, which is kind of master technician level, you're actually getting into working directly on the high voltage electrics. Now, clearly, you know, there's stuff that goes on even above that. You know, I mean, there are guys who work for some of the manufacturers who are qualified at level 5 and above. But we're being pragmatic about this. This is what is needed in the workshop. There are at the moment about 2% of all technicians in the industry. There's around about 180,000 technicians in the industry working both for franchise and independent. About 2% of them at the moment are qualified at these levels. There's a lot of people who've got a level 1 type qualification, which is information, which is knowledge only. It's knowledge, they haven't demonstrated any skill at that level. So these are the areas where you need to be able to have people appropriately certified. I mean, a lot of manufacturers are already working to those standards. A lot of independents are too, and in some cases they're working above those levels. That's neither here nor there really. That's something that individual companies will make choices on. But you need to know what the minimum standard is to actually be safe. Obviously safe literally for the people working on the technology, but safe within the regulations. And so I'm going to actually talk to the guys now. First of all, Quentin, just looking at your stats, to put things into context, at what point, so from a UK perspective, at what point are we going to see, I'm talking about just new car registrations now, are we going to see electrified vehicles overtaking internal combustion engine vehicles?
Probably around 222, 224.
As early as that?
224, sorry, not 222. 222, 224, 225, sorry. It's probably about that time that we will see a overtaking, if we can say that. It depends on a lot of different scenarios. A lot of different elements that needs to be taken into account, but we can see already a lot of people moving out and from diesel to either petrol, but not much. People tend to actually go towards hybrid vehicles and a smaller proportion to electric vehicles. And as the range and the portfolio of models that are offered are on the increasing thanks to the vehicle manufacturer. This is only going to enhance the demand. And when we look, we did a survey very recently with drivers. About 10% of them told us that the next car they would purchase would be either hybrid or electric vehicles. That was 2 years ago, it was 3%. So the mind is changing very quickly. The perception is changing very quickly. When we ask those drivers, why wouldn't you consider if they tell us petrol, diesel? Most people would tell us that's because I'm not convinced about the charging. I'm still concerned about the way charging this car is going to work. The range is too poor. I'm a little bit scared. What am I gonna do if I'm in the middle of nowhere and I need electricity? And the other one is because they are unsure about the cost of maintenance, which is also very interesting. A lot of people think that or have no idea what they need to do is the maintenance. While they know that they have a MOT every year after 3 years, and they know they need to do more or less a service at the same time, or only a service before the car is 3 years old, they have no idea for hybrid or electric vehicles. And I think those 3 issues that I just quoted are very easy to resolve. More vehicle manufacturers are offering more models. We can see a lot of them making a lot of improvement in terms of the design, in terms of the offer. So we can also, as the industry, explain them better the way charging works and the way maintenance works. And all those levers, all those points which are hindering them for doing so, will enhance them to do so. So that could come very quickly. And I think another very important point is the government support to actually purchase a car with low emission, but also the government support to install at your home a charging point. I'll stop here because I can go on and on for hours.
You'll have more opportunity. I mean, Tom, you actually directly train a lot of people on this technology. Which are the areas where you find people are particularly lacking in knowledge, or at all of that? I mean, you train at all of those levels, don't you?
Yeah. I think 2 things I'd like to come in on here, Steve, really. I mean, there are 2 different groups of people out there who are the technicians, if you like, people that are working on these vehicles, and that's my background, that's where I come from. And there are people who are jumping on this and doing the training, learning the different skills that are needed, and there's a big group of people who are saying, oh, I think I'll just ignore it and let it go by. And one of the things that I think is really important now is for any company, and there'll be some people sat here maybe thinking about this, there are companies already who are starting to specialise in electric and hybrid vehicle repair, and they're completely flooded with work for the reasons that Quentin was suggesting, that the customer doesn't know what to do. So if they can find somewhere that they know is qualified, experienced and capable to carry out repairs safely on high voltage from the point of view of the technicians, but also safe repairs from the point of view of the customer when aligning ADAS systems and things like this. So it's all through the range, Steve, really, that level 1, as we say, is an awareness of what's going on in electric vehicles. Level 2 is working on low voltage sides of high voltage vehicles. Level 3, as you suggested, working on the high voltage systems with it switched off. And the key difference is that level 4 is working on high voltage systems with it switched on. So this is clearly, an area where people have to be more careful. But as I alluded to before, there's huge opportunity here for, my battery's not working properly. I mean, I've seen examples already where people have thrown away an old hybrid car because the battery's not working properly, and all it needed was some corrosion cleaning off a few terminals when you know where to look and you know what to do, So I think I'm kind of suggesting to colleagues out there in the industry, there's huge opportunity here. Get yourself trained. We've got some, people on our stand who can help with that today. It's a great way forwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think. I mean, I've made that statement myself before, that in relation to the technologies we've alluded to here, the electrification, ADAS, the autonomous technologies as they come forward, I think I made the statement that the days of the gifted amateur are over. And that's the thing we got to remind ourselves. We're in generally an unregulated industry where anybody can set themselves up to service and repair cars. And that's going to be more difficult on these. Look, there's 32 million cars on the road, aren't there? 36 million vehicles, I think, in the UK in total, most of which are ICE, internal combustion engines. But I think counterintuitively, though, you were talking last night to us, Quentin. You were saying, actually, I mean, the overriding belief is that this is going to murder the after-sales business. And actually, some of your, I mean, I know this could form another entire presentation, but I don't know, you can just give us a little peep, under the carpet of that piece of research you've done that says that might not be true.
Yes, exactly. Yes, thank you, Steve, for this question. Actually, so we had a look in the EU5 countries that I was talking about. So we had a look. We do large surveys in all of those countries, and combining them all together, with most countries having 1% of their car park, which is at the moment electric vehicles hybrid. We had a look at those vehicles, especially. and the number of workshop entry they were generating, and the number of the value, the price paid, the last bill paid by the driver for those workshop entries. What is very interesting, if you remember my third slide, the hybrid electric vehicles car park is much younger than the ICE car park. Okay, we're looking at about 3 years old, roughly, versus 9-10 years old. Okay. And obviously, a car which is 3 years old doesn't need the same type of jobs that a car which is 10 years old. A car which is 10 years old, needing a clutch, a cam belt, whatever, is going more expensive than a service. That wouldn't be, I was about to say oil change. It's probably not going to happen on electric vehicles in the future, but you will need some service. However, if you erase, if we can say that, the age gap between those two different car parks, and if you look at the ICE car park, which is 3 years old and which is then comparable to the hybrid electric ones, okay? We compare apple to apple. Actually, the hybrid electric vehicles car park generates slightly more workshop entries per year. We're looking at a little bit more than the usual one. In the UK, roughly, there is 1.25 workshop entry per car per year overall. For hybrid electric vehicles, we're more looking about 1.3. Okay, so it's not a big difference, but it's still very interesting to see that it's totally different from what we would expect. We would expect, okay, we don't really need to change brake pads or brake disc anymore because we are not braking that much with that kind of cars. However, there is some other type of parts, type of service that needs to be done, and which is actually an opportunity for the aftermarket business. And to finalize, because those cars at the moment doesn't have those drivers, sorry, not the car, but the driver doesn't have a lot of options in terms of servicing, they're likely to go back to the dealer probably, or to a very specialized workshop. Those workshops, they know what they're worth. They're probably more expensive as well than the IC, the garage down the road. And because of this, the value of the workshop entry for those cars is also higher. So, long story short, again, those vehicles are not necessarily going to kill the aftermarket, not at all. In terms of volume of workshop entry, we're actually seeing the contrary. And in terms of value, not at all either, because it's a highly specialized market, and hopefully this could boost the kind of shortage of skills that we have at the moment, making that industry attractive again for young people.
Which actually then, Tom, means that the investment in skills makes sense. And actually, I mean, we were quite time limited on this, but unfortunately, but you've been working with us with the advisory group. But I mean, in your kind of words rather than mine, because I think people will listen to me and say, well, he would say that, he's the chief exec of the IMI. But you've been part of that group, and you've worked with all of those people from manufacturers, from independents, from big national chains. It covers the whole gamut, doesn't it? Yeah. And what I presented earlier on, and what you added to when you were talking just now, is culled from that, and that's what you and I are going to the Department for Transport and OLEV, the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, later this month, aren't we? Yeah. To put that forward to say to them, because having said that having put it into their Road to Zero strategy, because they do nothing about it, they expect us to come up with all the answers for them, which is fine, because we wouldn't really want it any other way. We would want an industry-endorsed solution. But in your sort of words, as a technical person, why would you actually commend that to people?
Well, the TechSafe initiative is what we're looking at here, Steve, isn't it, really? And just to, you'll probably get the illusion here, there's an homage to gas safe as far as this is going. But we're thinking of this as technology safe, by the way, not technician safe. So this is technology safe, and hence it covers working on high voltage and working on ADAS, for example. But yes, we've been working with a good representative group from industry, a sector advisory group as we call them, and everybody's very supportive about bringing this in. Now, you know, I suppose I have to use the word licensing here, really. That, I mean, if I had my way, everybody who works on any vehicle would be completely fully trained, licensed, and doing CPD every year in order to keep working on a vehicle. But I'm afraid that's just not how it works out there, you know? So we're trying to jump heavily on this new era that we're moving into of electric, hybrid, connected, autonomous vehicles, and ensure that people have a way of proving their competence while working on these things. So, for example, you know, we would expect a technician who's carrying out high voltage repairs with it switched on, as I suggested before, would be, you know, authorised by the IMI as tech-safe electric vehicles level 4. And they would be able to display certification that they were able to do that. So it's a form of licensing, and yes, to some extent it's voluntary, but as Steve suggested before, people working on high voltage vehicles in particular, if mistakes happen, then they contravene the Electricity at Work Act. The employer in that situation is not only liable from a money and an insurance point of view, but is actually criminally liable for not training their staff properly. So all of these sort of things need a fairly easy solution, and we have, you know, simple qualifications and a great network of centres who can deliver the qualifications for us at the different levels that I suggested and in ADAS. And when we've completed the process, that will also allow people to be tech-safe registered in the process of doing it. So we think this is a good step forward if we can...
and it does mirror in a lot of ways. I mean, you mentioned gas safe. It does mirror that in a lot of ways, doesn't it? Because it does require ongoing, continuous professional development to retain your certification, because technology moves very quickly. And it is all recorded on a publicly accessible professional register too. Because those are the things we were asked for. And as far as the health and safety executive are concerned, those are the standards they would be looking for when they're assessing an incident. And so, if you like, that's the benchmark for an employer to ensure that they're safe.
And as you suggested, Steve, we have got government support at the very highest levels for doing this.
Yeah.
They just won't mandate a licence. They will, you know, they will encourage us to kind of spread out this scheme.
Well, as far as the
which is the
EV
next
bit,
best thing, isn't
as
it?
far as the electrified vehicle bit goes, they don't need to because of the Electricity at Work Act.
Yeah.
But I think, But listen, I mean, unfortunately we've even slightly overrun our time. But we're not running off. We're going to be around here, so available to answer questions. I would really like to thank Quentin and Tom. Thank you for your contribution, and thank you for listening. As I say, we were limited to half an hour, which is, we could have talked a lot longer than this, but as I say, we're around, so be happy to talk to you and answer any questions you've got. Thank you. Thank you.